Well, after months, if not years of speculation, Governor Charlie Baker finally told us today he will not be running for a third term. And his heir apparent, Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito, won't be running either.
It was, in fact, a very complicated and difficult decision. There is a ton of work that's left to be done as we come out of this pandemic, and we believe it's most important that we spend the next year focusing on that and not focusing on, let's call it the discourse, and that's probably an insult to the word discourse, that comes with political campaigning.
And while that may be true, the decision also comes amid rising pressure from within their own party. Because while Baker is still one of the most popular governors in the country overall, he's not exactly been getting glowing reviews from a lot of Republicans in the state, many of whom have shifted further right in the Trump era. And it's worth noting that despite his high overall marks, Baker's tenure hasn't been controversy-free either, with the deadly Holyoke Soldiers home COVID outbreak, a series of issues with the state's vaccine rollout, the RMV and police overtime scandals, and plenty of MBTA oversight problems, to name a few. So even before today's announcement, the would-have-been challengers have been lining up. Former state rep Jeff Deal, who tried and failed to unseat Senator Elizabeth Warren in 2018, is the only Republican in the race so far. For the Democrats, longtime state Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, Harvard professor Danielle Allen, and former state Senator Ben Downing are all in the running too. With Baker out of the mix, politophiles are waiting and watching for Attorney General Maura Healey's next move, as she's long been rumored to be considering a run. I am joined now by Lisa Kashinksy, the author of the Politico Massachusetts Playbook, and Shannon Jenkins, professor of political science and interim associate dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at UMass Dartmouth. Thank you both for making time to be here. Lisa, let me start with you. The governor had been saying for a while that he was going to be making a decision soon, that he was getting close. Be that as it may, I felt like this decision happened really quickly and also didn't provide the outcome that a lot of us had been expecting. How widely foreseen was the possibility that neither the governor nor the lieutenant governor would seek a term in 2022?
Baker's allies, people from the political chattering class in Massachusetts, pretty much everyone, us included, had been going back and forth for a long time, as had the governor, over whether or not he was going to be seeking what would have been an unprecedented third term, and the lieutenant governor as well running for re-election in 2022. And he was still wrestling with that decision going into the Thanksgiving holiday. He had held a fundraiser just a couple of days before in Boston and had been ramping up fundraising throughout the fall, was still kind of grappling with this decision heading into the holiday, according to a source of mine. And he huddled with his family. The lieutenant governor obviously huddled with her. She, spoke about that today. And they came to this decision, told their allies, and it came very quickly, coming back off of the Thanksgiving holiday.
You mentioned this source of yours who provided some insight into the governor's thought process. We saw him in the press avail today talk about how there's a lot of important work to be done that he doesn't want to see politicized in the coming year. He also talked in a statement that he put out with the lieutenant governor about the importance, I think it's fair to say, of work-life balance, saying to do this job well requires an incredible commitment, an incredible amount of time and energy. And on the heels of the pandemic, we really want to spend time with our families because we realize how important that is. We also talked up top about pressure inside the GOP. What's your sense of, when it comes to certain factors driving this decision? There's a few I just mentioned. There's others. I was talking with a Democrat today who was talking about how hard it must have been to have protesters who have a somewhat distorted conception of reality standing in front of his house saying that he's an agent of the Chinese Communist Party and should be waterboarded. What's your sense of, in this constellation of factors, what was really important when it came to him making the call he did?
I think that there were a lot of factors at play, kind of as you just noted. I mean, there were protesters, and that's not something that anyone wants to experience, especially within and near their own home. There was the sense of his family. He talked about, both he and the lieutenant governor talked about actually being present. Sometimes he would be home with his family but not really there, something I think we can all relate to sometimes in these busy times. But that's something that definitely weighed on his mind. As their kids are getting older, they are getting older. The governor has talked repeatedly recently about turning 65 and what that means. And yeah, there are political factors at play. He brushed that off today and, kind of has repeatedly, the speculation that he would have run as an independent with the trouble that he could have faced in a Republican primary. He was asked specifically if he was, shaken or bothered by former President Donald Trump endorsing Jeff Deal. And he said, no, not at all. Some people think that the factions, the fights within the Republican Party may have played a role with this, but the governor, brushed that aside today.
Right. Shannon Jenkins, I should give you a chance to say if you saw this coming. Again, I want to be very upfront and say that this was not what I expected. Are you surprised by the decision the governor and LG announced today?
I would say I'm more surprised by the lieutenant governor's announcement than the governor's announcement. I think I could have seen the governor's announcement going either way. And I think, I do agree that he could have won. I mean, I don't think this was about whether or not he could win. He could have won. And I think that. I think this was an intensely personal decision for him. We're at a time where lots of people are quitting their jobs. And so it's not surprising to me that the person who's probably has the most stressful job in the state, multiplied by however much in the pandemic, is choosing to step back. But he has a record to run on. He was governor for 8 years. He's one of the most popular governors in America. He can step away saying, I did a lot, I accomplished a lot. There's less of that when you're in the lieutenant governor. You don't have a record. Most people don't know who Karen Polito is. So I think for me, the more surprising announcement today was the fact that Karen Polito said that she wasn't going to run, because I think pretty much everyone expected her to run if Baker decided not to.
I want to highlight some of the numbers that capture the dynamics that we've been talking about here. And then, Shannon, I want to come back to you for a question. There was a poll conducted, which I think I first read about in your newsletter, Lisa, by the Democratic Governors Association, which showed that Baker, running in a Republican primary, was going to trail Jeff Deal, the former state rep, who's already announced his intentions, by 21 points. And that same poll, which was conducted, again, by the Democratic Governors Association, that same poll found that the gap increased to 32% when respondents, likely Republican primary voters, were reminded that Deal has already been endorsed by President Trump. There was another poll, which again I read about in your newsletter, Lisa, conducted by Northwind Strategies, a Democrat-friendly consulting firm, which showed that running as an independent might actually be Baker's best path. He was leading in a hypothetical matchup, running as an independent, leading the pack with 32%. Maura Healey, who hasn't yet said if she's going to run, was getting 26%, and Deal was getting 21%. Shannon Jenkins, back to you for a second. You and I talked maybe a week or two ago about how even though it looked like his best bet for a third term, if he wanted one, it might be very difficult personally for Baker to decide to leave the GOP and run as an independent. Can you elaborate on why that would have been the case?
I think we tend to think of politicians in terms of sort of pure operative decisions, but they are in fact human beings who have values and emotions. And as we talked about, partisanship is really an affective attachment, right? People tend to develop emotional ties to their party before they identify their issue positions. And so it would be a very difficult emotional sort of hill for him to climb, to walk away from the Republican Party, the party that he has identified with his entire adult life. That's difficult. And I think for him, it would also have represented sort of giving up for the soul of the Massachusetts Republican Party. And so I don't think he really wanted to do that. That having been said, maybe I'm in the minority here, but I do think he could have won as a Republican, right? That last poll showed that honor roll voters are really sort of his meat and potatoes, right? And he could have, I thought, brought them into the Republican primary and won. And that's where I think the personal considerations came in.
Another factor which I hadn't thought about until our conversation was that his father was a Republican official in the Nixon and I believe Reagan administration. So yeah, as you're turning 65, to your point, Lisa, to repudiate the party that you've spent your life in and that your father spent his life in, that's a fairly heavy thing. Lisa, there is now, as we've mentioned, one Republican currently in the race, Jeff Deal. Jeff Deal put out a statement today about Baker's decision in which he said, haven't really agreed with him on policy matters. I like him personally. And then right after saying that, reminded people that he has been endorsed by President Trump. I was surprised by that because, well, that may play well in the Republican primary. He's currently without an opponent, and President Trump is not popular in Massachusetts. Joe Biden beat him by, I think, 34 percentage points, Hillary Clinton by around 30. Why is Deal, do you think, playing up the fact that he's sort of squarely in line with the Trump brand when he may just cruise through the primary? Because in a general election, I can't see that being an asset, but maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think he is still focused on the primary right now because while he is the only candidate who's in the race right now on the Republican side, I was talking to a few more Baker-aligned people in the party today, and one person described to me that they're already scrambling, trying to find another candidate who can kind of emerge as the more moderate standard bearer. Yeah, and there have been other Republicans who have expressed interest, in the past. So I've heard for running for governor. So while he might be the only candidate in the race now, it's probably unlikely that he'll remain that way. It's an open seat race. People are going to want to run for this seat, regardless of which party they're on. So I think that he will stick with that messaging for now because it's what the base, wants. They believe that it's a thing that got Charlie Baker out of this race, no matter how much the governor denies it.
Yeah, the Mass GOP statement about Baker not seeking a third term, I should note, mentioned President Trump 3 times rather than just the one time that Jeff Deal did. So it is what the base wants.
Shannon, can I add to that? I would also say that I think I 100% agree, but I also think that the Republicans are going to have a harder time drawing unenrolled voters into their primary now. It's going to be a competitive Democratic primary and a competitive Republican primary. And so Jeff Deal's meat and potatoes is the Republican base right now because the amount of, I think, unenrolled voters who will come into the Republican Party is small. And so I don't think he can afford to move to the middle yet until he sees, right, who else enters his primary.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, Shannon, let me ask you about the Democratic side. We've had former State Senator Ben Downey, as I mentioned, current State Senator Sonia Chang-Diaz, Harvard political philosopher Danielle Allen. Just watching Twitter today, I feel like about 20 Democrats have reportedly expressed interest in running. I won't even try to summarize. Some of them made me scratch my head. Some of them made me think, oh, well, that'd be interesting. How much do you expect the Democratic field to grow from this point on?
I mean, I think it will definitely grow. Political opportunities are few and far between in the state of Massachusetts, and there's lots of quality, ambitious politicians in the Democratic Party. So this is their opportunity. I mean, part of the reason why I think Joe Kennedy ran, last cycle was because he didn't see opportunities opening up for him because it was a big crowd. So I think there's going to be lots of people jumping in because there's not often a chance for an open election.
Lisa, speaking of Joe Kennedy, I will just jump in there. He has said, or at least a source close to him has said that he is not interested in the governor's race for everyone asking about that, or the AG's race if that becomes an open seat as well. And
we know now that Michelle Wu does not plan to run for governor either. She told the Herald she's not going to be doing that. Lisa, you got about 15 seconds. Any names that you think we should keep an eye on?
Let's see. I know names you haven't. I mean, Marty Walsh. He's leading the rumor mill today. The labor secretary, former Boston mayor, as other, he's topping the rumor mill.
And he hasn't bought a place in D.C. yet, so easy move for him.
He has not, and he still has about $5 million in the bank.
All right, Lisa Kashinksy and Shannon Jenkins, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.